Ole Miss got the September they desperately wanted, and Chris Childer stops by to talk playoffs and breakaway potential.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we are talking about Ole Miss finally landing a ninth conference game in the release of the first 3 weeks of the schedule. They play at nighttime against the Arkansas Razorbacks, despite being the third winningest program in the SEC currently. Old biases kind of die hard. We break down what we know so far this season about the schedule and what it means for the Rebels. In our second segment, we welcome Chris Childers from SiriusXM to talk about the SEC spring meetings, what's happening behind the scenes, and how the college football playoff might evolve from here. And in the final segment of the show, Chris is going to share his opinion on where he thinks all of this ends up when the dust settles. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or even Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, offering even more perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, when necessary and relevant, Ole Miss as well. So we were going to talk a little bit more about the SEC spring meetings, but the release of the first 3 weeks of the college football season got released, and I saw an article probably a day or two ago from The Athletic where they had every game for Ole Miss starting at 11 o'clock. And I was like, if you do that, Ole Miss fans will absolutely riot. Luckily, that is not what happened. So the hot Mississippi sun is not necessarily going to be a factor, at least in the first parts of the month, especially not for the opener. Ole Miss opens up against Georgia State. That game will be at 7:45 Eastern time, 6:45 Central on the SEC network. The next week, they go to Kentucky. That game is a 2:30 game on ABC. I bet they talk about Kentucky winning the year before over and over and over again. And then the game that I am ecstatic about right now, Ole Miss hosts the Arkansas Razorbacks. That game will either be at 7 Eastern, 6 Central, or 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 Central, and it'll either be on the ESPN or the SEC network. That should be a pretty great environment to see. Listen, last season, Ole Miss had potentially the most talented roster in the entire SEC. The draft kind of showed that as well. The stats, leading in scoring and scoring against, all of that stuff, Ole Miss should have been the team that carried the flag for the Southeastern Conference a year ago, whether through choking, you want to put it, or through mistakes, through analytics, whichever excuse you want for not making the playoffs, you can get to it pretty easily. But with the fact that Ole Miss was very talented and everybody knew they were favored to go extremely far, they could not get a night game over the course of the season. I think they played one night game, a non-conference game against, I don't know, was it Georgia Southern, Middle Tennessee? I forget where it was, but it was early in September or the third game or so. They did get a night game there, but they could not get a conference game at night. They played Kentucky at 11. They played Mississippi State at 2:30. They played Georgia at 2:30. And they played another game in the early part of the day. I think it was Oklahoma at 11 o'clock. They could not get a night game. They already have received a conference night game this season. This is awesome. This is going to help atmosphere. This is going to help everything. And everybody needs to realize Arkansas is going to be pretty jazzed up for this game, especially with how Ole Miss kind of ran up the score on them in Fayetteville the year before. This is going to be a pretty big deal. Now, on June 11th, The SEC will announce the remaining windows of their controlled games. If you're not being controlled by the SEC and Disney, they won't release that, but those windows will be available as well. It should be pretty great, honestly. And we're going to get to the SEC meetings and the chaos that's going on and what Chris Childers thinks is going to happen in just a second. But I wanted to talk a little bit about finally getting a little bit of respect that comes with an SEC night game. Ole Miss fans need to bitch loudly when they don't get a night game, when they do not get their way. We have learned through LSU and others that is the way that real change happens. It's not by emailing your athletic director. It's not by letting your president know. No, it's about making a lot of noise about the unfairness of the situation. And Ole Miss not getting a night game, home game in conference last season, not really fair. So we'll see exactly how that goes. A night game against the Arkansas Razorbacks. They also play Georgia State at night. And the game at Kentucky is the 2:30 Central Time game on ABC. Chris Childers from SiriusXM joins the show to break down the SEC meetings and share insight on what's coming down the pike. He gives his thoughts next. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performance, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. And with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I do not watch a lot of NBA. I mean, I'm pretty upfront about that. But I do watch a ton of MLB. And what Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green are doing right now, it should be commended. And the same game parlay of them would be good bets most nights. So, heck, you can even get Ole Miss at 8.5 wins this fall. Point is, there is something for everybody. If you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If that wins, you'll win $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. We are joined by Chris Childers from SiriusXM, the host of The Full Ride. He also does some NASCAR stuff. We're gonna figure out what Chris has been up to. And before we get to SEC Media Days, I know for a fact you are a diehard White Sox fan, and it's been a tough road to hoe over the last couple of years. But now the White Sox are the first MLB team that has a Pope as a fan.
And boy, have they reminded everybody constantly that the Pope is a White Sox fan. And I get it, because there's not a lot else to hang your hat on. Now, the good thing is this year, they're not the Rockies. They're not that bad. But I'm telling you what, man, the second they found out, and I think at first everybody thought he was a Cub fan. And then there was this footage. Dude, the second they got the Game 2 footage of the World Series, there is, I'm not kidding you, at the White Sox Stadium, they've put up a Pope shrine outside of the section that he sat for the World Series. And it's got his picture. And I think there's like I forget what they put, but it's like a whole Pope enshrinement there. So it's kind of cool. I mean, there's not a whole lot else to be excited about. So as far as the White Sox are concerned, they've got a Pope and Barack Obama. Those are the two big fans for the White Sox in their history.
Yeah, and Shoeless Joe is Hall of Fame eligible.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Which should have happened a long time ago, because he never bet on the game. He wasn't at fault.
Yeah.
But I'm glad now.
Yeah. And Pete Rose getting in, I'm all for that as well.
Too.
But my Tigers are heading down, I think, in about a week to guaranteed rate field to take on the White Sox. And right now, the Tigers are kind of a tough out.
They're good.
Yeah.
The AL Central looks a lot like it did last year, with the Tigers and the Royals and the Guardians all pretty good.
Yeah.
And able to beat up on the White Sox a lot and pad their record.
Yeah, and the twins are showing out a little bit
Twins
as
too,
well.
yeah. Yep.
All right, so let's turn our attention to the SEC Media Days because this week has taken on a life of its own. It's like people have assumed that the SEC and Greg Sankey was going to come out with something and they were prepared to be outraged by it, but nothing ever came out. It was all opinions and we're talking about it and all of that stuff. But you can see how fans of the ACC and Big 12, and they should be, I should say, they are ready to push the outrage button. Even the Big Ten fans, for some reason, are trying to do the outrage thing. And the Big Ten are just as much involved in this as the SEC.
I think we just need to be, well, they are. But the thing about it is that Greg Sankey puts himself out there. And Tony Petitti, I mean, if Tony Petitti was walking down the street, would you notice? Would you even know who it was? I mean, honestly, I cover the Big Ten all the time, and I'm not sure I would look twice. Greg Sankey has made himself a star. He's put himself out there. He's made himself kind of the mouthpiece of college football, whether he admits that or not, whether he's intended that or not. I think by him being the commissioner of the SEC, which is the most powerful league in the country, just based on popularity. I know the Big Ten makes a little more right now, but still the SEC, there's no doubt, is the power king here. And it's happened over the last 20 years, mind you. I mean, there was a day when you and I were kids where the SEC was always popular, but it wasn't winning at the clip that it is now. So I think Mike Sly, here's what I say about Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey, to me, needs to be careful. And I know that his job is to work at the behest of the presidents of the SEC. But whether he likes it or not, he's the guy in front of the band, right? He's the guy with the baton. He's leading everybody. So it's either he's going to do this right and everybody's going to be able to have their cake and eat it too, which means the Big 12 and all these other leagues will remain viable, or he's going to kill it. He's going to make the SEC just too big, too powerful. And if he threatens to walk away, I think at that point, even the SEC fans can hate him. I know you're a soccer fan, and I feel like he is turning into one of like the guy who is the president of Real Madrid that tried to get the Super League through. I feel like certainly there's a lot of money to be made, and the SEC is valuable, but it's almost like you're killing what matters and what makes it great, even though you're the best at it, in order for you to continue to be, king and to have everything and to not give up anything. And I think that's kind of what's going on. It looks like the SEC doesn't want to surrender anything at all and, get all these bids and doesn't matter who we play, we're the SEC, etc. And I think the coaches kind of echoed that this past week in Destin. And it's coming from Sankey and it's coming from the presidents. I think they just got to be careful that they get too fat, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to devil advocate because if you've listened to my show, I am pro 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC and the Big Ten. And this is the reason why. If they take the 16 best teams, everything becomes about the playoff. From the beginning of the season, we are automatically thinking about the playoff. Even the 11-5 model, it is all about the playoff. With this automatic bid, college football can kind of go back to that regional aspect that made it popular to begin with. Everything's about conference races, and then you can move on to the next level. You have different games outside to where the SEC and the Big Ten, they have a scheduling alliance that could happen under that scenario. They have playing games during championship week, which I still say that championship Saturday with playing games would be the greatest theater in college football history. Those things, I think Greg Sankey is actually saving college football by doing the regional aspect of this. And they realize the playoff itself, it kind of becomes that MacGuffin that everybody is talking about all the single time. And the committee, you're never going to have balanced schedules. You're never going to have that in college football. They've had that trouble for 150 years, balanced schedules. This is a way to get all around that, populate the playoff with, honestly, if we're going to be real about it, about the same teams that would have been in to begin with. And you get to have the regionality of the sport that made it so popular.
I don't mind the regionality. What bothers me is that the SEC and the Big Ten have become as big as they have. What bothers me is we murdered the Pac-12. What bothers me is that the Big 12 is not what it was. And it is Sankey's fault. I mean, Sankey was the one that initially added Texas and Oklahoma and caused these dominoes to fall. So is he saving it? Maybe. Was this inevitable? Perhaps. Do I hope you're right? Of course. Of course I do. But I get a little worried with some of the rhetoric. I get a little worried with, I thought he came out a little pissy, a little filled with vinegar, and to me, I just want everybody to realize that they are the caretakers. There is no commissioner, so they have to be the commissioner. What I don't care who pays them at this point. I really don't. Whether the presidents, the schools, whatever, their job's above that. It's got to be above that. They've got to understand that. And Petiti and Sankey hold the biggest stick, but I just think it's interesting, and you pointed this out, and I alluded to it too, that we never even hear from Tony Petiti ever. I think they had their meetings in Los Angeles, and they came and went, and we didn't talk about anything. So is Sankey saving it? Yeah, but all the controversy that comes with him, I think he does that to himself because he absolutely puts himself out there more than anybody else.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct on that. And when we come back, we will talk to Chris about what he sees actually happening, and I will let him know my conspiracy theory as well. So stick around for that. All right, Chris, conspiracy theory time, right?
Okay.
I think this was all set in motion by ESPN and potentially Fox before they got serious about everything, sometime around after the Longhorn Network got created. They started moving pieces on the chessboard at a slow enough rate that nobody would notice. All of a sudden, it picked up steam with USC and UCLA and Oklahoma and Texas, and then Florida State and Clemson trying to get the out of the ACC. They're like, whoa, what's going on right there? I think it is all connected, and this has been the large plan of Disney and of Fox for several years now to create a Super League.
It's interesting, and I could see that. And I don't think it's that far of a conspiracy reach, to be honest with you. As much as we want to put everything on Sankey and Petiti and Kevin Warren before him, I absolutely think that a guy that you and I knew from years ago is a part of this, and it's Jimmy Pitaro from ESPN, who used to be our boss at Yahoo. I remember bowling with him, years ago. Little did I know he'd be kind of, controlling college football. But it comes down to Mickey Mouse, and then it comes down to Fox and Rupert Murdoch and that group. They're the ones, and I 100% believe that ESPN was behind the realignment a couple of years ago when we saw those dominoes fall. I think Fox certainly pushed for UCLA and USC, and what we're seeing now, the SEC and ESPN, we knew that was going to happen. We knew that was down the pike. And so do I think they're controlling things behind the scenes? I don't think that's even a conspiracy. I think that's the truth. I think the reason we had all this realignment, the reason we're in this position is because ESPN and Fox said, we want this to happen and here's the reason why it's not a conspiracy. And you know this as a consumer, and everybody watching this knows this as a consumer. For example, if I want to watch my favorite show, so I like The Righteous Gemstones, right? And so if I want to watch that, I go on Max and I watch it. Or if I want to go watch reruns of Netflix, I go on it and watch it. It used to be in the past where we'd all sit together and watch the finale of MASH or, Seinfeld or ER on Thursday, whatever. Sports is the only thing that delivers that now to the ads, to the advertisers. It's the only time that you get viewers in real time. And so it's the only time you can really specifically target a demo in real time. With that said, Fox and ESPN know that, and they know exactly how valuable it is. And if you think about it, what they're doing, if you break down the numbers, they're getting college football on the real cheap. I mean, you could say that the Big Ten and the SEC are making all this money, but if you compare it to the NFL and go compare the ratings and the eyeballs and all that, we are getting screwed because we're not doing it collectively. We're not coming to the table as a collective college football. Like, just go look at what Sunday Ticket got. That's like the third tier. And that's like billions with a B. So to me, it's because Fox and ESPN know what they have, and they're able to kind of dictate it and get it on the cheap right now, if that makes sense. So I don't think you've thrown out that much of a conspiracy.
Yeah, and if you look at it right now with the current landscape, there's 19 teams in the Big Ten. Notre Dame is still out there. There's 16 teams in the SEC, and there's probably 4 teams in the ACC that ESPN would want to move over.
Yeah.
I think a 40-team Super League, it fits too perfectly at this point, honestly, like you said, for it to be a conspiracy theory.
And there's a lot of people that thought this was going to happen. I forget who it was, but it was a high power broker that was an athletic director. I want to say it was LSU, who said we are heading towards a Fox and an ESPN conference. And that's exactly what we have. And it's because of the money. And like Coach Neuheisel says all the time, and I think it really rings true. He says, the answer is money. Now, what's the question? And I think, and it makes me sad because at the end of the day, I think college football should be way more than money. I know it's a cash cow, but there's an art to it. There's a beauty to it. There's a elegance to it that I don't think is recreated anywhere else in sport. And I just hope we don't screw that up with the super leagues. And I don't think we should be killing all these other conferences because there's too many great opportunities for kids that I'm worried that are going to get, left by the wayside.
Yeah, and I think a G8 conference like playoff needs to happen. That would be a legitimate thing, and would probably
and give access to the winner to the top 2.
Yeah, something like that. We will see exactly how that goes. Now, what do you see? How do you think this is going to go down?
Well, I think it's going to be like this for a little bit. I think there's going to be a little messy public bitching and whining. Eventually, do I think the SEC gets what it wants? I do. Do I think they'll play a game of chicken at some point and try to threaten and say, we'll take our ball and go home if you don't give us the automatic access points that we want? I wouldn't be shocked if that ends up being a bargaining chip for them. I think they, kind of alluded to that in the past, at least people close to the situation have. Do I think that's smart? No. Do I think ultimately it would be good for college football? No. Do I think it would be good for the SEC if they did their own thing? I do not. I think it's the whole landscape of the college scene that makes it special. So I think we'll get some sort of compromise, but ultimately I think it's like, here's what I think happens. The SEC wants everything. And I think if they just give a little tiny bit of it up, then it makes it look like they've been charitable. Right? They've done something. They've made way. They've given up. And I don't know what that looks like as far as the bids and the seating and all of that.
It's
but if there's some way that Sankey
instead of the 2-2, probably.
There you go. And if Sankey then goes up and says, we did this and we did it for the betterment of college football, and we can kind of like buy it a little bit, I think then that's probably what we end up happening, but it'll be favorable to the Big Ten and the SEC when it's all said and done.
I think the problem that the ACC and the Big 12 have is last season, the playoff, when they went to 12 teams, the SEC wanted to do something for the good of the game, and they ended up with Arizona State and Boise State, just the 3 and the 4.
They did that, but they created that too, because the playoff would have looked a lot different if the dominoes hadn't fallen from Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah. If it was a situation, in my opinion, to where they compromised to get the Big Ten's vote. They did all these compromises for the good of the game.
Yeah.
And they ended up with the system that they immediately had to change because it was so flawed.
Because when they created the system, nobody thought that UCLA and USC and Washington and Oregon would be in the Big Ten and that Oklahoma and Texas would have been out of the Big 12. Because in that old system, you still could have had like a great Oregon coming out of the Pac-12 with, that could win in the playoff, or a great Texas or Oklahoma that could have come out of the Big 12. I mean, they've killed those leagues. I mean, literally the Pac-12's dead. And the Big 12's been neutered 5 ways from Tuesday.
And Kevin Warren gets no blame for killing.
No, because he's gone. He's with the Bears.
Yeah.
No, but he and I remember when he did it. Mm-hmm. It was right around the SEC Media Days, the preseason deal in Atlanta. I remember Sankey was pissed because he's like, I don't understand their values. I mean, Oklahoma and Texas fit our geographic. He was mad about it. But at the end of the day, I was like, Greg, they don't do that if you don't take Oklahoma, Texas. Yeah. Sorry.
But you can't say no to Oklahoma and Texas.
You can.
Well, you can, but
for the betterment of the game, you could.
Yeah, but he doesn't work for the game. He works.
I get that. I understand that. And there's the catch-22. That's the double-edged sword. But like, you could have said no, knowing that this would have happened. You could have. And quite frankly, I know I'm not in charge and I'm not working at the behest of the presidents, and they wouldn't let me because I would tell them, screw you. I don't care how good it is for our league. We're not killing a conference and causing this to happen because we're greedy.
The SEC didn't kill the Pac-12. The SEC had nothing to do with that. That was the Big Ten trying. It's like, oh my gosh, they got.
I know, but it's a domino. Like, I don't think the Pac-12 gets. And I'm an SEC guy, right? But I'm just telling you, like, in my opinion, it's like Jenga. When something, you pull that piece and everything falls down. I think the day Oklahoma, Texas went to the SEC is the day everything fell down.
The day everything fell down, this is my other conspiracy theory, was the creation of the Longhorn Network.
Oh, totally. 100%. You can trace it. Yeah.
Everything back to that.
Yeah. Remember, they were almost in the Pac-12. Remember that in 2010?
Oh, yeah. It was them, A&M, Texas Tech, and I forget,
but it was something.
I think it was Oklahoma. Yeah. I think it was Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M, and Texas Tech, or maybe Oklahoma State. And at the very last second, it fell apart. Man, how different would this world look like?
So different.
If that happened.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and you're right to say, just like with the Longhorn Network, and they never get blamed for it, but ESPN and Fox are the ones behind all of it. 100%.
Once the Longhorn Network failed, ESPN had to pivot. And once they pivot, it's like, how do we start coalescing all these large brands under one umbrella to where we have the biggest games every week, to where we make an NFL light type situation? And they've been working on that ever since the Longhorn Network wasn't quite as successful as they thought it would be.
Yep, 100%. And now they've been tinkering with it ever since. And little did they know we would have all the changes that we had that have been impacting the game when the Supreme Court ruled against the NCAA in 2021. And it's amazing that it's all kind of happening at the same time. It's all happening. The realignment, the NIL, the collective, all of it is happening at once.
Yeah, it's beautiful for content creators. I'm
no
very
kidding.
thankful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of June. I had a video 3 days ago that got nearly 5,000 views because it was on the SEC threatening to, or Greg Sankey getting permission to leave the NCAA.
Yeah.
And every locked on video, there's people using that same exact title because everywhere there are so many people so freaked out about this. And I do like to remind everybody that nothing has happened yet. Nothing.
No, we're just talking. But the fact that it's so up in the air is what makes everybody anxious because we don't have any answers and people love it too much. It matters too much to people.
Before I let you go, I do want to bring this up. In this era of less access in college athletics, because it's happening everywhere, they do such a good job in the SID offices of controlling the message and things like that and not letting you see everything. Now a press conference, whenever anybody says something, is taken as fact. And those press conferences are used to basically spin whatever position does you favorably, but it's presented as fact. Like Lane Kiffin said, hey, the top 16 teams should be in the playoffs. Lane Kiffin might believe that. Lane Kiffin's not going to make that decision.
Yeah.
And a girl in an apartment in New York City might want a pony, but there's nowhere to put it.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. So it doesn't matter that 16 teams, but there's 37 different content items about Lane Kiffin saying.
Yeah, it's the problem with, it comes down to the fact that, social media and you have so many different media outlets right now that are all fighting for money, fighting for attention, entrepreneurial journalism like yourself. That's where we're at right now. So you got a lot of people that are in the journalistic space that are fighting with each other for clicks and for ad revenue and all kinds of different stuff. And something like that, hey, that's going to get people excited. They're going to start clicking on things. They're going to, I'm going to get a little extra money because of this. So I think that's why, right? Like we live in this world where there's more coverage than ever before, but it may be not as how do I put this? Organized, and like back in the day, you knew to watch ESPN to get your sports news. And if you were going to learn about Ole Miss, you probably, subscribe to the Clarion Ledger or something like that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you got all kinds of options, right? You got whether it's Ole Miss or SEC or college football or regular sports or whatever it is. So I think because of that, you've got a lot of different kinds of members of the media, and you've got a lot of people competing for the same audience. So you're going to see more, and you're going to have people that aren't journalists, that aren't trained, that are going to run with sensationalist bullshit just because they don't know any better. So I think you kind of add a lot of that together. Because again, you're going to have good and you're going to have not so good and you're going to have okay, right? And that's what you're going to get in the entrepreneurial journalism space. And the ones that are good will last. But you know how it is when you get some yahoos that think they can do it and they're trying to generate clicks.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell everybody how to get your stuff and what's going on. What you have going on with NASCAR.
Full Ride is my main show with Coach Neuheisel that I do Monday through Friday on College Sports Radio, 84 on Sirius. I do NASCAR every week, a show called Backstretch Banner with RFK Racing, which is why you mentioned I'm a White Sox fan, but I have a Boston Red Sox City Connect hat on right now. And the reason being is because they are the F in RFK. So I get to wear as much Fenway gear as I want to when it comes to the Roush Fenway Keselowski stuff. And we just did a taping. So, which was a great show this week. And they're a lot of fun. So we do the NASCAR, and then I do Mad Dog on the weekends, which is kind of cool to talk Major League Baseball and the NBA and all that. So I'm around.
You're just everywhere, man. We've come a long way from Bill King and you sitting back doing Rivals Radio.
I know.
It's been a way.
I know. Those were interesting times.
Absolutely. Anyway, thank you very much, buddy, and we'll talk to you later, man.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen and your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes in the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can catch a Portal episode on Ole Miss tomorrow on this channel. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you later.